let's move on. Let's talk about what really is happening within the paints segment. And we have with us S Sundaresan, the joint MD and CEO at JSW Paints, joining in on the show right now. Mr. Sundaresan, hi, good morning. Good to have you on the show. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you. Very good morning to you.
Very well. Mr. Sundaresan, I have to ask you this before I move on to JSW Paints. What is it that you're making of all that's going on in your industry? Every cement player now wants to convert to a paints manufacturer, and the kind of consolidation that's going on. It's intriguing.
I think this interest has grown over the last few years. I don't know whether we have had a role in terms of a large group like JSW entering the sector, and us being able to establish over the last few years has also given an indication as to what others can do. But I think for a lot of the cement players, they probably see it as an adjacency, and paint companies over the last decade have been getting into other areas outside paints, whether it's construction chemicals or home decor, etc. So I think this has probably fueled cement players also to look at paints.
Yeah, seems to be an organic extension in that sense. But now let's talk about your business, and quite a few parameters really impacting the paint segment right now, namely the input cost price pressures, crude, etc., and what have you. And then, of course, the kind of overbearing it has on the inflation as well. That said, what I wanted to understand is, how do you see the pricing dynamics in an industry which still has a very large unorganized component?
Paint as an industry, has not been considered to be very price sensitive historically. Having said that, the last year has been very different. Because from almost a decade where the paint prices moved over the decade in just single digits, probably it would have been about 5 to 7% movement. We have seen almost a 25% movement over the last 1 year. So, which is a very disproportionate kind of a thing which has happened with the industry. I don't think it is fully played out, because most of the increase has happened or affected the market only from Q4 of last year. So we will need to see that impact. I believe there will be some impact of this in terms of the consumers taking note as to why prices have gone up so much, and whether there would be some correction, and there would be some movement within the segments in the category. People may look at some things which are a bit more value buy, because we do understand that paints is something which is not essential, but people consider it more as a maintenance segment. So either they might postpone a bit to see whether there is some softening of prices, or they might downgrade. Both of that we have been seeing over the last 1 year. But in the long run, I don't see it probably impacting much in terms of the increase in the prices, because parallelly, if you were to see the cost of painting, which is the service part of the process, that has also been significantly increasing, and paint as a part of painting costs has progressively been coming down. On an average today, probably 50% of the cost of painting will be the paint cost itself, and almost 50% is what goes for the cost of application.
I have a UBS report with me, and it says that entry of a large player like Grasim could be the geo moment for the entire paint industry. Paint industry, like you said, is an industry where return ratios are quite reasonable. It's an industry where if oil prices go higher, consumer paint companies increase prices. If oil prices they go lower, they retain some margins. What happens when a large player is looking at setting up capacity which Asian Paints has created in its entire existence in the next 3 years?
So, in terms of what their plans are and like how they are looking at it, I think they would be in a better position to speak. But paint industry has always had surplus capacity. It's not that any paint company has been, running to full capacity. There has always been a surplus capacity, and I wouldn't think that this is something which would be like a geo moment, because I think if you were to compare it to mobility, there are technology-led inflection points which have led to that change so far as the entire mobility space is concerned. But so far as paints is concerned, it's a bit more of a brick and mortar. It's a fairly mature industry brand. It's got a very wide set of SKUs. There is another. It's not just making the product. There is a whole ecosystem of influencers, etc., who have to be convinced that it is right. But certainly, a large player, like us at JSW or the Asdavilla group entering, will augur well for an industry which has not seen new players enter it for a long time, other than a few multinational paint players. It's not seen sincere, large, committed players entering the industry, which I think should augur well overall for the industry in terms of bracing up, improving its capabilities, trying to do new things, and I think the consumer will be the winner.
Your big picture scenario for paint industry for next 3 to 5 years? At what rate do you think the paint industry, the paint demand in India will grow? Oops, bit of a light on and off there. We need to add some colors perhaps in that room of yours.
Yeah. No, it's just, we have these motion sensors. I probably have been sitting unmoving for the last few moments, so that must have turned it off anyway. So for us, the paint industry is concerned, the demand has been growing in double digits, as you've been observing for a few decades, and it is likely to continue. So over the next few years, I think compared to the last couple of years, which have been pandemic affected, we expect demand to come back. I think the entire pandemic has raised the consciousness of health and hygiene and things like that, and the attention to home. So all these augur well. Yes, there could be temporary setbacks like what we are probably going through right now, where there is a certain pressure on inflation, and there is that thing of like, should I spend now? Should I wait and spend? There could be a temporary periods where we might have a little bit of slack in demand, but over the next few years, I see it bouncing back and people taking to paints and painting a lot more than what they would have in the past. Coupled with that, of course, the expansion, so far as housing and people wanting to get into their own houses, and the entire real estate and construction a gap which is there in terms of housing demand. I think that getting plugged will again, we believe, contribute to a robust demand so far as paints is concerned.
Good morning. This is Netra joining in the conversation. Thanks for that. And I'm just going to take forward, the entire geo moment, as it is being called, for the paints industry. Like you said, JSW Group maybe has shown the others how to enter the paint industry and create synergies. But as that happens, and this is indeed going to be the geo moment, what about pricing power? Because we saw what happened when Jio entered the telecom space. Paint already have an overcapacity, as you were talking about. Can we expect, pricing power to be impacted?
Certainly, when there is more competition, one of the things which naturally would get affected in terms of the pricing power of the established players, because in an industry where the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players put together don't measure up to what the number one player does. Certainly, competition and serious and significant competition will have its role to play on pricing. But having said that, globally, paints and decorative paints have been businesses which are more like consumer businesses. You build brands, there is equity, there is profitability which comes in, but pricing power will certainly be affected. The ability, for instance, even in the recent past, of companies to be able to chase windfall profits by leveraging pricing power, I think those will certainly be challenged. And with more competition, with more availability, with more options to the consumers.
Okay, so let's see if we do see that happening, a price war of sorts that some people have already started talking about, despite input costs being so high. Thank you so much for joining us live today. Paints, of course, has been a hot space this entire week. You can look at the way Berger, for example, has been falling in the last couple of sessions. Asian Paints also taking it on the chin, painting quite a few sessions red thanks to Grasim. And that's JSW Group and its plans for this sector at large.